Cool, right. So I've started recording, mate. So what I'll do is I'll share my screen with you. And can you see the screen okay?
Yeah.
Is this the thing you wanted to do?
What I was wanting to do this session was go over some opening stuff with White.
Right. Okay, so I'll start a new chapter. That's right. Yeah, you see, I really remember what you told me. Flipboard. Right. Okay, so we'll start there.
Cool.
Right. So let's say, okay, so what do you normally do when you're White, Cameron?
Normally I play E4.
Right. And if I go for Sicilian, what are you doing then?
Oh, I'll be honest, not good against Sicilian.
Really?
Yeah, with White, I'm way less prepared than I am with Black at the minute. So, against E5, I've got mostly there.
So so if they go E5, you're playing the Vienna, right?
Yeah, so I'd go knight to C3.
Quick quiz question: Who did the song Vienna?
Oh, not a
bit
clue.
Before your time, right? You must have heard of that song.
If I had to guess, I'd guess someone like ABBA. They named
a little bit after that. It was actually Ultravox. It's like this great song. It goes Vienna. Seriously, check it out after this because it's a really classic song. It was 1980s, right. And it was famous as one of those songs that didn't get to number one.
Oh right.
Anyway, going off on a tangent as normal. So let's say I go right. I'm going to test you. Let's say I go here, right? What are you doing?
Then I go bishop to C4.
Right, and if I then go here, what are you playing?
Pawn to D3.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? Okay, let's say I went here. So I played all my pieces on normal squares, right?
Yeah.
So this is just what I say to people, by the way, Cameron. Think about the opening logically, because too many people that spend their time analysing lines of engines, which is fair enough, but they never think about how their opponent might respond logically.
Yeah.
You know. So after bishop c5, what are you doing?
Pawn to f4.
Wow, really? Okay, so let's say I went full... Oh, hang on, I can't do that because I'm dropping a knight. So that's a bit stupid, right? I've lost a plot already. Let's go here then. I've blundered already. I've lost the game already. But let's go here. It's more normal, right?
Then I'd go knight to f3.
Right. And if I go here now, what are you doing? Apart from panicking.
Yeah, now I'm going. So I haven't seen this before. Oh wait, no, I have. Never mind. I'd go knight to G5.
Really? Wow. Okay. Interesting. I'm shocked. Okay, I'll castle them.
Pawn to F5.
Nice, right. Okay. And if I go here, what do you do?
Queen to H5.
Wow, so you do know your onions, actually. You've checkmated me. So firstly I blundered a piece and then you checkmated me. So basically you got some idea what you're doing here, right? Let's say I didn't go knight g4 and I just castled. What are you doing?
If you castled, then I'd push the f pawn.
Right, to f5, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. And that's interesting. Yeah, because I must admit I'm not an expert on these kind of variations at all. So what is your... Yeah, carry on.
With the Vienna, I've mostly done the Vienna Gambit, accepted and declined. Yes. And then these more symmetrical starting positions, the only one I haven't done is the main line, because no one has played the main line against me yet, so I've not gone down that route.
Right, okay.
Everyone's always either played the Gambit stuff or...
Right. So if I go for the French, what are you doing after the French?
I'd probably go D4.
And if I go D5?
Then E5.
E5. So you like the French Advance, right?
Yeah, because it's the one that I've done most as black, so I know roughly more.
Okay, so I'm going to go C5.
Then C3.
So I must admit, the time that I've been working with you, your openings, I believe, have improved a lot, right? It's fair to say?
Yeah, I've put a lot more work into it. And with black, I'm really solid now.
Yes.
Whereas at the start, I was definitely more confident with white than with black.
But that's mainly your own work, right? I mean, I've just kind of given you some ideas about how to annotate your games, but I mean, I'm getting the impression that a lot of it's just your own hard work, right?
Yeah.
How old are you again, Cameron?
26.
So you're like a baby, you know. I'm like, you know, it's probably why you never heard of that song Vienna. You know, actually, I believe a lot of the Vienna was obviously quite a famous capital for culture, and there was Sigmund Freud was from Vienna, for example, and also I think a lot of chess players were from that kind of part of the world. Right. I believe the first. Do you know? Okay, if I asked you a chess general knowledge question, who was the first world chess champion?
Oh. No idea.
Can you name any world chess champions?
Yeah, I can name a few.
Yeah, okay.
I'd assume they're from, like, the Soviet Union.
Yeah, there was a few, yeah. I think the first Russian or Soviet world chess champion was... Or I should say Soviet. I think Alekhine was Russian as well. Or he's...
the first Grandmaster was Soviet, wasn't it? Not chess.
Yeah, well, there were several Grandmasters at the same time. It was I think the first world chess champion from Soviet Union was Mikhail Botvinnik in 1948. But I think the first world chess champion was something like 1880s was Wilhelm Steinitz. And he was, I believe he was Austrian originally. I believe he was from Prague. So obviously Vienna is not in Prague, it's in Austria. Sorry, I believe he was Czech maybe. So he was from Prague, possibly. He was either from Prague or Vienna. But he died in New York. So the first two world chess champions died in New York. It was Lasker, who was German, and Steinitz, who I believe was either Austrian or he was from the Czech Republic. But he actually spent a lot of time in London, actually. And the funny thing with Steinitz was that he actually lost money from becoming world chess champion.
All right. Because
he had a lot of students in London. He had to do a lot of chess training, a bit like I do, right? But, you know. And not that I have to do it. I love doing it, obviously. I love doing it, right? As you know, right? But he lost some of his students while he was doing coaching, while he was playing the World Chess Championship, sorry.
Oh, right.
So that's an interesting story. Yeah, a lot of chess players from the past was destitute. Anyway, I've gone off on a terrible tangent. Right, so if I go knight c6 now, what are you playing?
Knight f3.
Right, and if I now go, let's say I play queen b6, what are you doing?
Is it a3?
Yeah. You know, a good way to play. I had a game recently against Michael Adams. He went something like here, and I'm not sure about the move order, but he put the knight. Actually, I think I delayed. I might have gone knight e7 immediately. I can't actually remember the move order, but he did this. And sometimes you put the knight here to defend the pawn that way.
Right.
But a3 is also another line, right? So I don't want to confuse you too much. But a3 is an interesting line. Okay, so after a3, let's say I went f6. How would you play?
Would you go b4?
b4, yeah. Right. Interesting. Possible, yeah. And if I now take...
then take back with the pawn.
Okay, and then if I take here, what are you doing?
Take with the knight.
And you're not worried about queen d4 now?
I mean, I probably should be.
Yeah. And maybe go back a move is a better way to recapture.
Would you just recapture with the pawn?
Recapture the pawn, very good. Yeah. So, okay. So let's say I went here now. I don't know what. Actually, maybe I'll try knight h6. What are you doing after knight h6? And why did I go knight h6? Just out of curiosity, if you can answer me that question.
Is it to eventually go to g4 so that you can attack the pawn in the centre?
Exactly. Or maybe just to go to f7, depending on... Because if I go to f7, in some ways that's a better square than g4. And the reason is... well, actually, I want you to explain why f7 might be in some scenarios better than g4, because it's not about me, right? As much as I like to make these things about me and glorify myself, right? Why is f7 potentially a better square? Also, in some scenarios, g4 can be better than f7 as well. But why would f7 be better than g4?
Is it because if you then got the dark squared bishop out and castled that way, you have a bit of, like, extra protection, I guess? Yeah,
partly, but also I think it's to do with the continuation of the moves. So if you go to g4, it has the absolute extra thing that you're attacking f2. However, if white manages to defend both threats, the danger is you then get driven back later. So you'll lose time. If I go to f7, I'm not sure, like, let's say I played a move like here, and you went here, I could maybe meet that with going queen e2. Now, I'm not sure that's a good move here because you've got lots of things you can do. For example, you might be able to go knight d4. So I'd have to calculate knight d4, knight takes d4, queen d4, that variation. But the danger is if you haven't got anything good, then I'm going to go h3 and you're going to be forced to lose time.
Right.
I mean, after knight d4, for example, I think I can take and go bishop b2. And I'm defending all this, and then you still have... If you go here hoping for this, so checkmate, I can probably hit your queen, force you to go back again. But if you go... So you might end up losing time is the main point. But if you go to f7, you don't have that issue. Now, if I do this... Let's say we had a continuation like this. So one of the things I always ask people, Cameron, as you probably well know, is how would you assess this position? Because I always say to people, subconsciously you assess positions anyway, even though you might not realise it. You're always assessing positions. We're sort of like, do we fancy this position, right?
Yeah.
You know, if I was a chess player, would I match with this position on Chess Tinder? You know. But it's like we're subconsciously assessing it. But I would say to people, you know, it's a good idea to think about the position and think about, you know, how you assess it. Like, how would you assess this position? Who do you think is better? Is anybody better? Yeah.
I think. I would say white's maybe slightly better. But I think it's probably pretty equal. Right.
Okay, slightly confusing answer. I would just simplify it. Do you think white is better, black is better? I would just say just simplify it all, right? Is
white's slightly better.
And why is that?
They've got more pieces developed. They've taken quite a bit of space as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Good answer. Right. I don't think, like, when I first started working with you, your answers would have been that accurate, right? So you've already made progress. By the way, Cameron is probably the most improved player, one of the most improved players I've ever worked with. You know, in the time that you've been. Yeah. What's your rate? Your ratings now are going up all the time, right?
Yeah, I'm about 900 on chess.com, 1330 on Lichess.
And what do you realistically you're aiming for 2,000 plus, right?
Well, short term, I'm aiming for like 1,500. I'd like to get to, and then we'll see from there.
But obviously, chess is not your profession. You know, I saw on Super Prophet. I don't know if you saw my post, but there was I think we first connected through Super Prof, right?
Yeah.
But there was somebody on there, and she was claiming to be a GM, and she had a profile where it was all written by ChatGPT.
Right.
And then I noticed there were quite a few of these profiles, and it was like round Olivia's house or something like that in Bristol. So it was a grandmaster come round my house, and I was thinking, how much would I have to pay her to coach her, right? But it was basically a fake account. It was like, yeah. So, but I think that Super Prof is actually a fairly good website, right? Because it's helped to connect a lot of people, and. I think I closed my account, but I think maybe I'll go back on Super Prof. But going back to this, okay, so I think you got a fairly good understanding of what to do in that variation. Just out of interest, after say A3, okay, if I go C4, what are you doing? Because this is another way that black can play.
Yeah. I'd maybe go knight to D2.
Which knight?
Knight B.
Right.
D2.
Exactly. Knight BD2. Okay, so now I'm going to go here.
Then I'd go B3.
Yep. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to take.
And then I would take with the knight.
Right. And then if I take here.
Take with the pawn.
Okay, so now I'm going to develop again.
And then I'd maybe go bishop to E3.
Right, I'm going to hit your pawn.
Then bishop to B5.
Right, hit your pawn again.
Then I'd maybe just castle here.
Right, yep. Okay, hit your pawn again.
But really after this pawn.
Yeah, I'm a greedy guy. So when you look at this kind of position, what are you looking for? Like white to play, right? Because it's a typical position going out the opening. You've got a slight lead in development, but your pawn's been attacked.
Yeah.
How are you approaching this position? What are you going with?
So there's no checks.
Yeah, exactly. So I always say look for checks and captures, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Basic calculation is the most important thing. If you can't get the basics right,
yeah.
A lot of people, I think, if they just went with that basic checks and captures, the amount they would improve is enormous.
So the two moves that I'm looking at most at the minute would either be taking the knight with the bishop,
right,
or attacking the light squared bishop with my knight. Those are the two main ones that I'm looking at the minute.
Oh, okay. Right. Knight c5, you mean?
Yeah.
Right. Are there any other candidate moves? Because I think it's important. I think a lot of candidate move recognition comes from, I would say, experience, but also pattern recognition. You know, you've seen similar ideas before. Sometimes it's just knowledge. You know, a lot of it's just knowledge. Like this position, my first instinct, Cameron, is white could be in trouble if you just grab e5. But on the other hand, the other way to look, you approach a position logically, right? The black king is in the centre. Yeah. So rather than panicking, I think, well, you win e5, think about it logically, that might not be the end of the world.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, for example, on the last move, instead of going knight e7, what other option did black have? Sorry, instead of going knight g6, I should say, what other option did black have? There was another option here, by the way. That was very important. That black would have had to calculate if you got to this position. You might not play it, but you definitely have to think about it. Again, we come down to the basics, right?
Mm.
So I'm like pushing you this one. I'm not really pushing you to get the best out of you, but I'm giving you quite tricky puzzles. Black to play. I mean, I can flip the board if it makes it easier.
It might do.
Let's calculate a line together, right?
Yeah. Would it be pawn to a6?
That is a move. It's a move. But I feel like what's the fundamental when we think about calculation, right?
Captures and...
So you start with the captures. E5. Exactly. So knight e5. So let's calculate knight e5 without moving pieces. Knight takes e5.
Yeah.
Now, what moves would you have to calculate then if you were black?
Bishop check.
Bishop takes is the most obvious move because you don't want to take back the king because your king's in the centre.
Yeah.
So you're probably not going to take back the queen because he hangs e5 directly. So you're probably going to have to take back the knight. Now, what would white play after knight takes, which might possibly put black off playing this whole variation altogether? Well, I don't know. Obviously, I mean, I've not checked this position. I don't know what. There's no theory on this. I wouldn't have thought. So it's probably we're just making this up as we go along.
Right.
I think we left theory by now. Yeah. So after knight e5, bishop d7, knight d7, what candidate moves would white have that we would need to calculate?
Hang on, where you got knight d7 from?
From e5. So I go knight takes e5,
yes,
bishop takes d7, knight takes d7. What candidate moves would white have? And how would you assess the position without moving the pieces?
So there'd be... I guess queen takes c3.
No, it's white to move.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's quite tricky, isn't it?
Yeah.
Without see, a lot of getting stronger is being able to visualize as well. I think.
Yeah.
Which is probably easier for me because I've done it for like years and years. But if somebody's inexperienced, can be quite hard to visualize those positions, right?
Yeah.
But that's how you get your calculation better. A lot of it is visualization and being able to calculate. So bishop takes d7, knight takes d7. What would white play?
I
feel like there's some promising moves there for white, but I don't know what the assessment would be.
Could you go bishop to... No, that's just end up trading off.
Yeah.
Although, if you went knight to c5 then?
Knight takes c5.
Yeah.
I think you got the right idea, just the wrong execution.
Oh, right.
So I'm thinking something like knight bd4 or knight g5 would pop out as a candidate move because I feel like what... So the way I would assess this position is, as black, I'd be a little bit scared of the lack of development.
Right.
And the fact that you can castle queenside, but your queenside is fairly open as well. So a move like that would scare me as black. I'm not sure what the assessment would be, but it wouldn't surprise me if white was doing well.
Mm.
Because how do you defend it? If you have to play a slow move like this, it looks a little bit... It might be a good move. You run into moves like knight b5, rook b1. This is why calculation is so hard, because on every move, there's a new option. There's a new position. I've got moves like c4, queen a4, knight g5.
Yeah.
I have to calculate all of that. But obviously, the more you can calculate that, obviously, the stronger you become, and the more better you're able to calculate. I mean, So I don't know, but I don't know how we got to that position anyway. But I think the other question was what happens after that, right? How are we assessing the position? I think it's similar to the position we just examined.
Yeah.
So probably similar choices for white, right? Mm-hmm. What would be the similar choices?
So there's still maybe not. So yeah, the
So you mentioned this move, and you also mentioned this move, right?
Yeah.
You did mention that. So if you take here, let's say I take back the pawn. What are you playing?
Then I would probably play. Then I'd go knight c5, I think.
Yeah, good choice. Yeah, right. And how are you assessing the position here?
I think white's probably better here.
Right. And you're not worried about losing a pawn after something like this?
I mean, I probably should be, but
but I guess there's stuff like knight e5, queen e5, and then moves like rook b1 or knight d7 followed by rook b1. I mean, for example, one line I would calculate is knight takes e5, queen e5, knight takes d7, king takes d7, rook b1, bishop d6. Now you can't go f4 because of queen e3 check, but you can go g3. Or you can throw in rook b7 first. Rook b7, bishop c7, g3, rook hb8. And then there's stuff like bishop f4 maybe. Bishop f4, queen takes c3. Maybe black's just material ahead, right?
What I was thinking, I mean, probably
no. So I'm losing to rook c7 in that line. Sorry, I miscalculated that line. Sorry, yeah, carry on, mate. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably not enough compensation, but what I was thinking, I guess, would be, knight takes e5, then queen takes, then knight takes the bishop.
Yeah, king takes. Yeah.
Yeah, I figured king takes, and then they lose castle, and they're just sort of stuck in the centre while a lot
exactly
more in the centre.
Exactly. Already. I mean, it might not be good, but as long as you've got ideas, and sometimes our ideas are bad. But I feel like that's a lot of calculation. Calculation and ideas go hand in hand. We see ideas through calculation.
Yeah.
And sometimes the ideas are bad, but it's better to have bad ideas than no ideas at all, I would say, in some ways. Like if you sit there and you don't do any calculation, you never come up with any ideas or any options, then you're not really going to make any progress.
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay, so that's interesting. So you basically have quite a reasonable feel, I think, to do with French. But let's go back to Sicilian, right? So let's flip the board again. Let's say I go c5. What are you actually playing after c5?
A lot of the time, either a3 or c3.
What do you think I'm going to say about the move a3?
You're going to be... play something more normal and stop playing things like e6, b6.
I'm going to say it's crap, right? Don't play a3 because you're not going to improve that way. I honestly think if people sit at home and they go a3, I say shame on you. You're wasting your time. If you want to get better, you've got to start playing main lines, right? Or you don't have to play the main lines. Okay, c3 though. c3 is not... That kind of fits in with your repertoire. I mean, I would prefer knight f3, but if you're going to go for c3, that's fine because that's more sounder opening. So that's a good recommendation, I would say. But also it fits in with your repertoire, right? You're playing the advance, and a lot of the variations you get in the advanced French are similar to the c3. So if I go e6, for example, and you go d4 and I go d5, and we could even directly transpose. So okay, so after c3, Cameron, if I go knight f6, what are you doing? This is how I build a repertoire for somebody. I just go, what are you doing? If I do that, this is what the lazy person does to build someone's repertoire. You just go, right, what are you doing after that? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm either.
Just check. I'll definitely press start recording, right?
Really seen that position. So the two that I'm thinking at the minute is either just going d4 anyway, and sort of ignoring the fact that knight's
okay, just go back to his position. So white plays c3, Cameron, with the idea of building a centre with d4.
Yeah.
Because if you go for the main line of French, so one of the reasons behind Sicilian, why I was like the Sicilian as black, was because you're exchanging off a wing pawn for a central pawn.
Right.
Yeah, I love the Sicilian as black. It's always feel quite cool to play c5 and take on d4. I think probably some early game when I was in childhood kind of convinced me that I like the Sicilian defence. And I never really played e5 against e4. Occasionally I would, but not very often. Probably should play e5 more often. But going back to this position, yeah. So white decides to play c3 because they want to build a centre, but without losing the control of the centre in that sense.
Yeah.
So the two main moves after c3 are d5. So world-renowned expert on the c3 Sicilian said that d5 was possible for black. But he said that, this is going back quite a few years, a guy called Sergei Tiviakov said that he used to play the c3 Sicilian a lot. And he said that d5 was slightly better for white, although engines don't really agree with this. They say the positions are equal. He also said that knight f6 was the best reply.
Right.
That's probably the most these are the two most popular replies after c3 is d5 and knight f6. So after knight f6, the main move after knight f6. Do you want to know what the main move after knight f6 is?
Yeah.
e5. You push the pawn and you attack the knight.
Oh yeah.
You've probably seen this before.
I think in one of the other games on here I might have played something like this.
You're gaining space, and now this pawn is irritating for black. So after knight d5, what would you play after knight d5?
Now can you not just go for d4?
You can do, but white actually typically brings the knight. I don't know why you don't go d4. You can go d4 immediately. White typically brings the knight out to f3 here, by the way.
Right.
That's the most popular move. Now, in this position, black has several moves. But the two most popular, in my opinion, are knight to c6. Or alternatively, they just simply pawn to e6 with the idea of developing the bishop. Also, they would challenge the centre with this move d6. They can also play d6 immediately. That's another line. But let's say I went knight c6. What would you do after knight c6?
I'd maybe go bishop to c4.
Yeah, that's the main move. Yeah, well spotted. Right, so now I'm going to go knight b6. Attacking the bishop.
And then would you just slide back to b3 maybe?
Yeah, exactly. So there is an interesting move. I actually played this, I believe, against Sergei Tiviakov, and I went... Not sure exactly, but I think I played this move. I did lose in the end. It was a game at the Isle of Man. It was quite a good game, though. He played quite a good game. I went c4. So what do you do after c4? So I think your basic plan, by the way, just to go back to this position, Cameron, sorry to go off on a tangent again, but it's just to go d4.
Yeah.
So your idea is to castle. So let's just say that black played baby moves. Your basic plan is something like this. You take the centre. Let's say they exchange. You've then got very easy development. Knight c3. Queen goes to e2. So let's say I went here. We'll come back to that position after c4 later. But let's say I went here. How would you play?
I'd maybe support the pawn with the bishop and go bishop to f4.
Yeah, that's a good try. Yeah, that's a good idea. I think actually because here I think if black exchanged queens though, I'd be slightly concerned that the position becomes very drawish.
Right.
I mean, I think white has don't get me wrong. I think white has an advantage here because you can put the knight on e4. Something like that would be a good idea. But on the other hand, if I want to get an attack here, so let's say, so always we think, what does my opponent intend to play, right? It's prophylactic thinking.
Yeah. What
does my opponent intend to play? They intend to take the pawn on e5 and then exchange queens and try and hold the endgame. At the moment, their development is not very good because the knight on b6, the knight on c6, kind of stuffing up their position a little bit. When the bishop goes to d7, it's got nowhere to go because the knight on d7, knight on c6 rather, is stopping it from going to c6, for example, where it'd be on a very good diagonal. So if I was looking at this position, the first thing I'd think is a black king is not in a great spot.
Right.
So I want to try. So how do I start? Avoid the exchange of queens and start to play for checkmate. How would I start off?
Would you go knight g5?
Probably not, because after knight g5, bishop takes g5. I'm losing the piece there. So.
Oh yeah.
So I like the idea, but we want to build up the position. How can we start by building up the position?
Would you just go like a4 or h4? Sorry.
But the same problem arises. If you go h4, I'm going to take off, and then I'm going to chop the queens off and get a boring endgame.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I see what you mean.
So what I would do here, Cameron, is I'd actually go Boris Spassky's. Again, knowledge of chess history is sometimes useful. Boris Spassky had his very famous saying where he said, "The queen always belongs on e2." He loved putting the queen on e2. So he said on e2. It's very well placed, particularly in this position, I think. Because white's plan now is very basic but very straightforward, which is to go bishop c2, queen e4, and play for checkmate.
Right.
And if black, let's say black continues. Now, black can play moves like knight d4 here, which are probably quite a good idea. But if black continues like basic style, I'll just develop the pieces. Now, if I could probably go rook d1 first, actually, just to kind of make that even more real. Now, if I just do this, what is now your plan? What is now our plan? How do we continue with our plan? And actually using that pawn on e5. So this is one of the basic ideas of this opening, is just to gain that space advantage.
Right.
So I'm using that pawn on e5 as a bridgehead to build my attack. So really, I've got that space advantage. Now I'm going to push forward and create an attack. How do I carry on with the attacking flair? Because I like forcing moves, Cameron, which basically forced them, to make a move that they might not want to make, right? Or at least, like I said, I think I said this before, you're using pure mathematics. You play a move which threatens checkmate, there's always a chance they might miss it.
Yeah.
Or they might respond in a bad way. So that's why I always love making a run. I always like forcing the issue, because you never know, you might get a mistake out of your opponent.
Yeah. So you still going for bishop to c2 then?
I love bishop c2 here because, I mean, there are other options like knight g5 here now. Knight g5 is a very good option as well because you're probably going to be forced to take. And this, if I went after knight g5, if I went g6, how would you continue the attack?
Would you go to queen to h4?
Correct, yeah. Now, I don't really want to take this guy because I feel like I'm weakening the dark squares. So I'm trying h5. Now, how are you continuing with the attack now after h5? Maybe there isn't a good way, actually. Probably blundered again.
Could you maybe go g4?
G4 is definitely the move. That's the move I think you want to play. The only problem is I'm not sure exactly works in this position because after knight e5 there is a slight issue which is to do with the weakness of this square.
Oh yeah.
Because if I now take here, there's stuff with knight f3 check.
Yeah.
Or even bishop g5 first. So what I would probably do here, Cameron, I'd say, well, look, I'm just looking at this position logically, and I'm saying this black king is not looking good. You know, I think sometimes if you take a pause in your games and think about the position logically, and say, look, don't panic. You know, the worst enemy for a chess player is to panic. Look at this position logically and say, well, look, the black king is in a very bad spot. It's got no defenders around it. I've got lots of attack. You know, you weaken your position. I'd probably play a move like bishop f4.
Right.
If nothing else. And when you take, and I've got nice options like queen g3, for example. You know, and I feel like I'm doing something. But going back, probably a simpler option rather than knight g5 was like what you suggested, bishop c2, because now black has really not very good options to defend the king side. You have to go here, which weakens the dark squares.
Yeah.
And now there's probably no forced win for white, but something like bishop h6, rook comes across, queen f4, I believe would be very promising. This is a very typical position you could get in a c3 Sicilian middle game.
Right.
So it's not just sufficient to know the opening, it's also useful to know the middle game positions.
Yeah.
So I say one of the ways you could train that is just to play maybe training games against the engine from a typical position. That's
one of the things that I started doing after I messaged you saying I need help with openings with white.
Yeah.
I was like,
you said, I'm not getting any help from Gormali, so let's switch on the engine, right?
I was like, I know the moves of the opening, but where I struggle is the plan after.
Exactly.
So
because
not doing that.
I played a lot of training games against the engine, and it's funny how often you can get positions like this in the C3 Sicilian, where they go for this very standard but actually difficult to stop plan of just attacking on the king's side. So I think black generally will go for more active options in these kind of lines. Having put the knight on c6, they either attack with d6. I think that's supposed to be a more reliable variation. But the other way they can play is c4. So after c4, what are you doing after c4?
Would you slide back to c2?
Correct, yeah. Okay, so now I'm going to attack your pawn again with queen c7.
You go e2 with the queen?
Yeah, the Boris Spassky advice, queen belongs on e2. Yeah, defends pawn. So now I'm going to play a radical move. I'm going to push pawn onto g5. Because this is quite a testing way that black can play. This is one of the main lines, I think.
h3?
Yeah, that's very playable. Now I'm going to bring the bishop to g7. So what are you thinking about this position? White to play. What's your thought process?
So there I was just trying to calculate going d4.
Right. CD.
Then take with the bishop.
And if I take on E5?
Then what would you be taking with?
With the knight. Sorry, knight takes E5, yeah.
Then I would take back with the knight as well.
What, on E5?
Yeah.
And if queen E5?
Well, I'd have to take with the queen, wouldn't I?
And right, and then bishop takes E5?
And then bishop takes G5.
If rook G8?
Push H4.
Right, yeah. And if F6?
I suppose H6.
Bishop H6.
Yeah.
Rook takes G2. It's quite complicated, all this, isn't it?
Yeah. Maybe just something like knight BD2.
Yeah,
Castle,
I think it's knight D2 by that point because there's only one knight.
Oh yeah.
Or you could take on H7 actually because because the rook's on G2. There's no rook H8.
Oh yeah.
So you could probably take the pawn and then try and queen your H pawn.
Yeah.
But I think we've gone a bit far. But I think the general gist is that White will generally lose the E5 pawn in this variation.
Yeah.
But will win the G5 pawn. Now there are moves that White can play like E6, I believe, and then kind of mess the black pawn structure up and then take the pawn. That's another option as well.
Right.
I mean, it's worth investigating these lines because these kind of lines are quite critical. So it's worth, I think, checking out the theory in that line. Okay, so I've tested you on the Sicilian. So you seem to have the C3 Sicilian. Actually, one other variation Sicilian I want to test you on the C3 Sicilian. What happens if I go D5? Because that's also a very critical move as well.
Would you then go straight for D4?
I think you normally take.
Right.
You normally take. And now I'm going to take back the queen. So it's a little bit like, just to give you a comparison. So sometimes we compare opening variations. So that's why often, Cameron, I think it's a good idea to just know as much theory. You know, a lot of people, they kind of like, well, I don't play that opening, there's no point in learning the theory in it. But if you know as much theory as possible, your knowledge is as wide as possible, you can then compare positions from other openings. You say, oh, well, yeah, I know that opening.
Yeah.
Right, this opening is similar, so therefore I feel reasonably comfortable. So, for example, if you're White and you feel comfortable playing against this variation, which is the what's this opening called, Cameron? Scandinavian or centre counter, right? I believe it's called. Yeah, exactly. It's mainly called the Scandinavian. And have you ever been to Scandinavia, by the way?
No, I would like to go at some point.
Yeah, I've been to Sweden.
Oh, nice.
Played for England at chess, the European Team Championships in Gothenburg in Sweden, which was quite a nice experience. That was in 2004. You know, so it was quite a long time ago. But I also played in Denmark. I guess that's not actually technically Scandinavia, right?
I think it counts.
Is it Scandinavia? Yeah. I played Copenhagen, played Politic and Cup back in the day. Should go abroad more often, actually. The problem is, Cameron, a lot of these tournaments now, you know, actually prize money has not gone up in the last 20 years for a lot of these European tournaments.
Yeah.
So everything else is more expensive, so therefore conditions are worse. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. It gets harder and harder to play chess. Anyway, going back to this. So queen d5. Normally, white goes d4, and then attack, or plays knight c3, attacks the queen. So if you go out this position where I go e4, c5, c3, d5, it's kind of similar to setting a counter. Except I don't get knight c3. The pawn's on c3 instead. But you also have the pawn on c5. So whether the pawn on c5 really helps black in this type of position is not like a normal Sicilian. Because I haven't exchanged this wing pawn for a central pawn. It's not exactly clear. So after queen d5, what would you play?
Would you go knight to f3?
Yeah, that's one of the main moves, right? Exactly. So now I'm going to play... Right, I'm going to play one of the classical main lines, which is knight f6. So I'd say the advantage that black has in this particular variation, Cameron, is their plan is to go e6, put the bishop on e7 and castle kingside. And then because this structure, the pawn on e6, pawn f7, pawn g7, pawn h7, they've got a very safe king. Their king side is very safe. So it's white to play here. What are you playing?
See, if we're thinking similar to Scandinavian, if you got rid of that pawn on c5 and mine on c3, I would be going d4 here.
I think d4 is a good way to start, yeah. I think that's a good move. So d4 is a good response because now I'm attacking the pawn. Okay, so now I go e6. What are you doing now?
Maybe go bishop d3.
Bishop d3, yep, that's one of the best responses, yep. Okay, so now I'm just gonna what am I gonna do now? I'm gonna take, actually. I'll take.
Then I'd take with the pawn.
Yep, now I'm gonna develop the knight.
Castle.
Yep. Okay, so now I'm gonna develop the bishop.
Knight to c3.
Very logical move. So attacking the queen. Yep. Very good. Yep. So now I'm going to retreat the queen. Where I'm going to go? I'm going to go back to d8. Right.
Then maybe bishop b5.
Interesting move. Yeah. Controversial, as they say. Right. Would you not be concerned that you're moving a piece more than once in the opening? You're doing a typical amateur reaction of I'm going to move a piece. Because I think,
but I feel like most of my pieces are pretty developed. The bishop.
But what is your plan if I just go bishop d7, for example? What is your plan with bishop b5? Because I feel like one of the ways you could break through is start to think, you know, like in the last game when we talked about that was the typical middle game position that you'd get.
Yeah.
One of the ways I think you can improve, if you feel comfortable in the middle game and you know what you're doing in the middle game, you don't feel the need to play reaction chess.
Yeah.
You don't need to feel the need to play, like, go, you know, what it's very easy to fall into, which is try to create threats move by move. Rather than that, you start to build up your position slowly because you're comfortable that you're confident in your position and you know what you're doing and this is how you are going to play. Because you know the position, you know the plans that are available. So bishop b5 feels like a reactive move to me.
Right.
It feels like you're just doing something that's not really... It's not even clear that taking on there, to me, is a threat. The main reason is, I think, because black would have the bishop pair.
Right.
So I would go back to this position. I'd come up with a different idea. I feel like that bishop is a... Black's going to castle kingside. So bishop is already on a great square.
Right.
Can we come up with another? This feels like a very typical position. Again, you could get in a c3 Sicilian as white. Classical position, you often end up with this isolated d pawn. Now, not everybody feels comfortable playing those kind of positions as white, I'll be honest with you. Are you familiar with a whole isolated d pawn?
Not particularly.
No. Okay. Well, right. So let's say I played a move like rook e1 because I'm not threatening this because I'm going to drop the queen. So let's say I castle. Let's talk about isolated d pawn positions. Now, with isolated d pawn positions, what it tends to be is very strategically dynamic. So white has this pawn. Now, what black will then aim for is to probably exchanges will help black. The more exchanges you get, if you imagine all the pieces came off the board and you just had king versus king, black would be doing quite well because this pawn is a weakness. So the more pieces that get exchanged, the more that white will essentially do well. Black will do well out of the exchanges.
Right.
So white has to bear that in mind. However, not that move, probably he's just going to lose a pawn. However, white tends to have a little bit more space, so has more attacking chances in the middle game. Black can often blockade that pawn, by the way, because white will often try to play this move d5 as a pawn sacrifice even. So black would often try to blockade. There's even a whole book written on queen's side, on isolated pawn middle game structures. So if you want to get really kind of technical, there was a book written, actually quite a good book, it's by a sort of Russian-Irish grandmaster called Alexander Baburin, who's from Russia originally but now lives in Ireland. And he wrote a book on just the whole pawn structures in isolated pawn positions. There's one way, as an amateur player, I would recommend picking up that book because it's quite a good way of increasing your knowledge about pawn structures.
Right.
But in this particular position, how are you playing this position? And then I'll talk about how I would play this position. I'd approach this position as white.
Maybe go bishop f4.
Right. Why would you think about bishop f4?
Mainly, I was just thinking that enables connecting the rooks.
I quite like that move, by the way. I think it gains space. I think that's a good option. The only thing I would say is I'd be slightly concerned that you're not increasing the... Eventually, black might threaten to take this pawn. They can't do it immediately. But some point later on, they might... So I'd be slightly concerned that pawn is still a little bit weak.
Right.
I mean, these type of positions are very tough to handle, I think. I like your bishop f4 option. Another option I would consider here as white is to play the move a3. Now, that looks like a weird move, but the reason is you have to think about what your opponent wants to do. If you go bishop f4, one of the candidate moves that black might consider is the move knight b4. Which again looks a bit weird, but it hits the bishop, threatens to exchange off the bishop pair. If the bishop retreats, now I've got this option of bringing the knight to d5 and blockading and really controlling, sort of keeping a lock on that whole square. So I could play the move b6. Let's say you went here and now I come here and I'm hitting the bishop directly.
Yeah.
Let's say I play a move like here, and now I'm developing the bishop. Bishop's on a great diagonal. I'm not sure if this is a good position for white or not. So go back to this position. I think, well, I'm a little bit concerned about this threat of going knight b4. I'm going to go a3 instead of bishop f4. By the way, all these kind of positions, I always feel with somebody, I say to people, Cameron, it's not about the coaching, right? The coaching probably gives people 1%, if that, right? I never had any coaching, but then I'm a natural born genius, right? So I didn't need it, right? But the point I was make is that kind of position is fascinating to me, because it's a typical middle game position you could get. And if you study it really deeply, you get to understand it. Your chess knowledge, will increase. And anybody can study this position and spend hours and days and weeks studying this position, so you really know it very, very well. Or you don't study it and you don't improve. So this is a typical middle. So I think that's the way forward for you, Cameron, is to study maybe the C3 Sicilian for now. I would recommend, because that seems to me to fit in with your repertoire. I would give the A3 the boot altogether.
Yeah.
That's my recommendation, right? Just give that the boot completely. Yeah. Focus on this one opening and get that down pat. I mean, maybe we could play a game for this position. Do you want to play white or black? Play a quick game for this position.
I'll go white.
Okay, so continue. So what account am I playing against?
It'll be Cam GP2.
Right. So I'm going to play black, and it's casual game. Right. So Cam is capitalised, right?
Yeah.
GPT. Yeah. Okay. So I've sent you the game, right? So we're going to play a game for this position. By the way, did you watch the England game the other day?
Oh, I did. I was good.
I think everybody was, but I feel like now they've got rid of Southgate, we can get the shackles off.
Yeah.
Well, Southgate's resigned, right? So whose move is it actually?
I think it's black.
Okay, so I'm going to go here. Because my plan is to, I'll just tell you, my plan is to put the bishop on b7. It's not a very unique plan, but I hope it will save me. Now, hang on, why isn't the clocks going?
Oh yeah. Does it wait for me to make my move?
Maybe it waits for you, right? Right, now it's working, right. Right, I'm going to take the pawn. We could do a take back. You want to take back?
No, we'll just run with it.
Okay. It might not be that bad, actually.
I like coming back to win from losing positions.
Yeah, that's a good move. That's the move that scared me, because now I'm concerned. Okay, I'm going to go here. Maybe 95 was a good option there, actually. Okay, go to the bishop.
That's not been a brilliant start.
Yeah, but my last move wasn't the best. Maybe. Not sure. Do. Yeah, that's what I was worried about. So I missed that earlier. It's possible I should have gone Queen G6, because if I had gone Queen G6, Rook D7, I had Bishop H4 there. And you couldn't take on H4 because of Queen G2, and if you took on G6 and took that, then your Rook's hanging. Okay, it is what it is, as Nakamura would say. We carry on.
Well, I moved it from one spot it could get taken.
Right. Draw for your draw. Well, I'll tell you what, let's quickly analyse that, right? So I thought here, what I was concerned about was mid like Queen F3. In fact, it's apparently still theory.
Alright.
Weirdly enough. But yeah, I think in these kind of positions, saying the main line, this has actually been played quite a high level. It was a game between Judith Polgar and Anatoly Karpov. And Judith Polgar played Bishop C2. There's a couple of games between Karpov and Jan Tim and Karpov. So these are quite famous players. And that looks more typical to me. Like this is sort of like maybe too premature.
Mm.
And then after Bishop B7, for example, then you go Queen D3 with the idea of trying to attack on the King's side. So that's probably a more typical way to play, but yeah, I mean, I think the main thing to take away from this, Cameron, well, for both of us really, is firstly, I think there is still that slight weakness where you're making too many, like, rather than building up the attack, maybe work on sort of like just slow positional games, right?
Yeah.
And also, the other thing I would work on is, middle games. One of the typical middle games you're going to get, which I think you've already thought about before, what are the typical middle games you're going to get in from that particular opening, and then work from there, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Cameron, I will probably finish there, mate, because I need some food, you know, being a fat bastard. But I hope that you found that useful.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, mate. Well, I'll stop the recording at least.